Thank you, Dustin. It's a reminder what we're looking forward to. But we live here and now, don't we? We live on this earth. We struggle through it. Sometimes life is easier than others. And if you notice the sermon title, there was a book written by Francis Schaeffer in the mid-70s by that title. Some of you may be familiar with it. It had a lot of influence in the evangelical church. But he actually borrowed that question from Ezekiel 33:10. And the question implies a context. How should we then live? Well, what were you talking about before? Schaeffer's book, he was addressing the decline of Western civilization and those Christian values that had been for centuries, and they're in decline. I guess if only he could see now, right? And so that was his premise. These things are happening. How should we live? In Ezekiel, it's a little different context. The people are crying out. It goes something like this: "Our sins are so great. How can we then live?" Or some translations would say, "How can we even survive?" Gives a little different twist to it. In light of our sins, how are we even going to make it? Well, I'm taking the liberty to kind of create a context here, and so I want to do that. I don't feel qualified to take on anything like Schaeffer did. But in creating this context for the question, it was something that had been on my mind for a while, and anyway, one of our family rituals is before lunchtime. Lunchtime is a meal we typically eat together, and we'll have a few verses of Scripture that Becky writes out, and we have it taped up to the window, and we read them together. And the intention is to memorize them, and then once they're memorized, she puts up another one, and we keep going. And we are going through the book of James, and one day as we were reading, the way the verse was written, it just really jumped out at me. Not so much by what it said, by the way that the paragraph structure. And as I looked in, maybe I didn't ask the right questions of the online of Google, but I tried to find out is James addressing some heresies here, or what is he doing? And I couldn't really find any. But there are two belief systems that would have been in play at the time that the Epistle of James was written. And the first is Buddhism. Buddha lived approximately 400 to 500 years before this time. And I don't know how his beliefs would have influenced. He would have been in the Far East, how much his beliefs had gained traction in the Near East, but in Buddhism, kind of one of the basic tenets or principles of Buddhism is that desire is the source of all evil. And in order to get rid of evil, we have to get rid of our desires. Okay? Is that biblical? This is where the context is starting. I'm starting to create a context here. And then the second one is the second belief that was gaining traction in his time was Gnosticism. And that was kind of, the belief was that we can possess some sort of a secret knowledge. And one of the ways that you attain that is by denying the physical body comforts and pleasures and so on. And you all can correct me at any time if I get some of the stuff wrong, but from what I understand, it was a belief that the physical, let me see if I probably wrote it down here, the physical body and the physical world are not reality, they are an illusion. And we need to seek the spiritual, denying the physical. So these things that bring the physical body pleasure, fulfillment, and comfort are of lesser value and possibly even evil. And we should deny ourselves those things in order to achieve a higher reality. Now, this actually gained quite a bit of traction within early Christianity. You think of the monastic orders, that the monks would go and take a vow of celibacy. They would live very poor lives in sort of, denying yourself. Now, you're probably wondering what I was reading in James. If you turn to James chapter 1, James chapter 1, verse 13. This is the couple of passages we were reading. James 1:13. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Sounds almost like Buddhism, right? We're getting pretty close. Remember what Mike said last Sunday in talking about the creation? God made everything what? Good. Evil is a perversion of the good. Are there such a thing as good desires? Yes. So evil is not caused by desire, but by evil desire. You follow what James is saying here? And then the next verse is what really jumped out at me. And because of the way the paragraph is structured, the first sentence is explaining the rest, okay? Don't be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of firstfruits of all He created. So deception then is believing that these good things are evil. Isn't that interesting? I mean, in this context, deception is seeing these good things that God has made and calling them evil. We could start stepping on some toes pretty quick here, couldn't we? I think Todd has said in street ministry, there's two verses that every college student knows. One of them is don't judge, and the other is that God made every green herb good. And they're partly right. Think about it. Did God create anything evil? It's in how it is used and the pursuit of those evil desires. Would you agree with that? I think that's what James is saying. Don't call these things evil. That's deception. Every good and perfect gift comes from God. Now, I'll give you another thing that sort of got me on this. And I shared this with the guys in the Wednesday night prayer group a number of months ago, and so forgive me if you've heard it before. But I was having issues with my water pump, and it got to the point where it would just constantly run and never shut off. It wouldn't build up enough pressure to kick the pressure switch off. And typical me, I tend to wait to the last minute. But this one, I actually jumped on it before it completely quit. So I knew the repercussions of not having any water at all. So I guess herons know what that's like right now, right? Anyway, I was pretty convinced that the well simply didn't have much water in it, because what would do, I'd had 3 different pumps in that well over the past 20 some years, and they all pretty much acted the same way. They would build up the pressure. You take a water hose and start spraying. 30 seconds in, the pressure would just drop. And I thought, wow, the well must be out of water. And so, but anyway, as I was saying, the pump just kept running and it never would kick off. That way, this thing's about ready to die. So I called the plumbing place and said, "Hey, can I get a pump installed?" And they said, "Well," it was right around Labor Day, and they said, "No, we're all booked up, plus the holiday coming in. You have to wait till Monday." And I said, "Well, I'm not sure I want to wait that long." I said, "Can I just come get a pump?" I never changed one before. Just a little tip: if you ever change a submersible pump, have a good spotlight. Very important for lining up that adapter. Anyway, so I went down, and I got down there, and the guy said, "Hey, I've got this pump here. We don't use this type of pump because it has a plastic head on it. We only go with stainless. But it's perfectly good. It's never been used, still in the box. I'll sell it to you for $150. Oh, great. A new pump typically is $400 to $500. So it went home and we put it in. And I had water like you wouldn't believe. I could actually turn the hose on and the thing would build pressure while it was running. I've never had that. Here to come find out, it was a slightly different type of pump, which I hadn't known about before. And this is where I got to thinking, and do you know what it's like living with something that's just kind of a weight on you? Okay, so in my mind, our well did not have a lot of water. And cows drink a lot of water. So actually, I was using a trash pump to pump water out of the creek for the cows, just so it would take less than the house and the barn would have more. It's like I didn't have to worry about that. There was water. I can't pump it dry. I can't do that anymore. It just keeps going. And I'm still kind of excited about it, actually. Because our house is like 100 feet higher than the barn, so we had to have a lot of pressure to get it to the house. And if there was not, I would have enough pressure at the barn, but if someone was taking a shower or using the wash machine or the clothes washer, it could be issues. So there was always this communication. Okay, I'm going to start using water now. Can you hold off here? Every good and perfect gift is from above. Would I be more spiritual if I put the old pump back in? And this was a question I posed to Becky, and she said no. I said, is this sermon material or not? And she said, not really. That's a very obvious question. And so actually I wasn't sure if I was going to pursue this, but then a couple months ago, Todd spoke. And he, just check your memory here. What did he talk about? Very, very, very fascinating message. Come on now. He talked about rest. See that you, Hebrews 4, I think was the text, talking about how there is therefore this rest. Let's enter into this rest that God has provided. And I talked to him a little bit after church, and I said, well, I was toying with something, and then I thought, well, I wasn't sure if I was going to do it. Then I said, your sermon kind of sparked it back up, and he said, so this is going to be a public rebuttal? No. Ethan, could you bring the chalkboard up? So I started looking at this from a different angle. Okay, remember, every good and perfect gift is from above. Does God give us good gifts? Is He stingy or is He lavish? You weren't sure of that. Say that again. Thanks. That's good. Thanks, Ethan. I still remember a sermon that Mike Roy preached years ago about the sower. Now let me paint this picture for you. The parable of the sower, the one that, let's say I go into the feed mill and rent one of their spreaders, and I get a bunch of fertilizer and seed mixed up, and I bring it home, and partway home, maybe I cross Rush Creek, I get out and I turn the spreader on. And I just start slinging seeds all over the road. I go down this road, that road, I go through this person's field, and then I go to my field. Would you think I'm smart, or would you think I'm crazy? But that's what this sower was doing. He was just, and I remember Mike was commenting, like, it's like God is just lavish. He just throws these things out. You know, we think it's a wasteful. It would be no sense in me slinging expensive fertilizer and seed down 312, would there? No. But God is lavish in His good gifts. And He has given us rest. So, how do we get there? Or what does it look like? And Todd quoted, "Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, learn of me, for I am meek and lowly of spirit, and you shall find rest unto your souls." Now, one of the words or titles for Jesus is a good shepherd. He also says in John chapter 10, the thief comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. I have come that they may have life, and that they might have it how? Abundantly. Am I getting too close to health and wealth gospel here? This is the reality. If Jesus is the good shepherd, how does a good shepherd take care of his sheep? Now, I want to see how many of you know what this is. I should say first, after I spoke last time, Toby came up to me and said, "I don't think I've ever heard a sermon about cows before." Now, Toby, if you let me talk long enough, I'll go back to cows. So I've been talking for 20 minutes. We're going to talk about cows for a little bit. What is this? What is that? Very good. Not a very good one. That is a cow's rumen. Basically, a cow is a walking belly. That rumen is huge. I mean, I've got a little bit one here, but nothing like that. Just a little quiz here. Some of you ag people might know. How many gallons a big, high-producing Holstein cow, how big is that rumen? How many gallons will it hold? Take a guess. Real close. 40 to 45. Not only that, but when they are really producing, they are going through that much in a day. You follow me? So it's not just sitting there, it's constantly moving. Okay, now, a cow, this is an imaginary line, but a cow needs about half full to survive. That's just what it takes to maintain her, keep her alive, keep her going. In order for a cow to be really productive, you got to keep it about to there. Could you turn the slide on, please? What happens when it gets full to there? What does a cow do? Does that remind you of a psalm? Those are cows, not sheep. He makes me to... Now there's one stubborn one there, but did you ever get the idea that the shepherd goes along and taps the sheep, says, okay, lay down, lay down, lay down. He makes me lay down. Okay, time to lay down. No. When this, sheep and cows they're both ruminants, they function the same way. When that thing gets full, they lay down. Now, are those cows resting or are they working? Both. They are being extremely productive. I tell you, you want to see a bunch of restless animals, have a bunch of cows that are about this full out on a short pasture. The whole herd will just be constantly moving. Just a bite here, but just looking. It's I don't like to see that. That is the picture of Psalm 23. He makes me lie down in green pastures. That is what Jesus is offering. So, how then should we live? How do we find that rest while being productive? You know, we're not ruminants, so I can't use the excuse, well, I just stuff full and lay down all day. I can't do that. It's not my excuse. You can turn it off now. So, I just came up with 10 things. Now, they may resonate with you, they may not. Take them for what they're worth, okay? Some of these things are inspired, some are not. But how can I, and that's the question, how should we live? We have been so blessed. Do I need to feel a little bit guilty? If you're somewhat of a Gnostic, yeah, you would say, no, you have to deprive yourself. So that's the context of my question, how should we live? And so here's 10 things. Take them or leave them. Well, a couple of them you should do. The first one, get right with God. If you have not gotten right with God, you cannot have peace. You cannot have rest. God is your enemy. We are dead in trespasses and sins. We are enemies with God apart from being made right with Him through Christ. Get right with your fellow man, number 2. Grudges and animosity fester like a disease. They deprive us of rest. David Moore and I were talking a little last Wednesday night after church, and he was telling a little bit about, I guess last Sunday, he taught last Sunday school, and it was he dealt with the question of submission, and how in his life he had a hard time submitting to his boss, and how God, I guess he used the term, took him to exile. And just how he had to work through that. And I just thought that is so fascinating, because if you can't submit, you're not going to find rest. The prisons are full of people who have yet to learn that. Number 3, and this I'll have to confess, I'm not going to expound much on this one. It's something I need to learn, work at myself. In a few weeks, Pentecost is coming up. I remember what James said about every good and perfect gift is from above. If there was a gift unlike any other, it was the gift of the Holy Spirit. So here's my admonition, or my suggestion. Seek the leading of the Spirit. God has given us the Spirit to lead us with His Word, but actively seek the leading of His Spirit in your life. Number 4, be thankful. A few years ago, Rob shared an illustration. He was talking with one of his coworkers at the post office, and this was around Thanksgiving time. And he asked him, he said, "What are you thankful for?" And the individual, I think he listed off a couple things like good health or something like that. And then Rob asked him, "Who do you thank?" And apparently the guy just, didn't he say like the genetic God or something? It's like, I don't know who to thank. We have someone to thank. And it's what makes life make sense. If you read Romans, that there was a disconnect. Those who refused to thank God, their thinking became foolish. Thankfulness is what makes life make sense. So if you want to live a life of unrest, be ungrateful. I'm going to save the last inspired one till the end. So I've got these 5 others here that they are just, life has a way of teaching you some things, and take them for what they're worth. Number 5, live with a sense of urgency so you don't have to live with a sense of panic. Any of you know what I'm talking about? Some of you know the joys of having natural gas on your own place. It's great. Like Charlie Weed said once, it might be free, but it's not always there. And when it's not there is typically when it's cold. I thought this past winter we were going to get off easy. January was beautiful. And I didn't, and our gas pressure normally stays pretty good, except when it gets cold. And I didn't have any firewood cut. So I thought, well, I'll go cut some sooner or later. Well, then all of a sudden the forecast was rain, snow, and cold for 2 weeks. And I didn't have any firewood to speak. That's panic. I am purposing this year to fill up my firewood thing by Labor Day. I've got Labor Day in mind, so I don't have to panic come January. Is that a decent suggestion? I have to give a little story to this one too. Our water heater needed replaced a couple weeks ago, so I trying to line everything up, make sure I had everything, and here I didn't have 2 of those half-inch couplings because I was afraid I was going to have to change the length of the lines coming into the water heater. And this was in the evening, and so I called a couple different people and said, "Hey, you got any of these things?" And nobody had anything. So I was just getting ready to come in and just forget it for the night and do it the next day. And one of the guys that I had talked to, I pulled into the garage and he called me. And he said, "Hey, Marvin," he said, "who's your best friend?" I thought, oh, I bet he found those couplings for me. But I wanted to be honest. And so I said, probably my wife. And man, you would have thought I stuck him with a pitchfork. He said, I don't know any other guy that would say that. Now, that's not quite as romantic as it sounds, because I'm a dairy farmer and I don't have any friends. I don't go fishing, I don't go hunting, I don't play cards, you know. That sounded morbid, didn't it? Make your wife, listen to the guys, make your wife your best friend. Maybe you already do that, I don't know. And it's kind of a novel concept to me, and I'm kind of trying to work on it a little bit. So, it only makes sense. You live in the same house, right? So, try it. Number 7. Don't just give your children things, give them responsibility. Now you say, well, how did that one get in there about being restful? It's interesting, sitting in the teen class, and Aaron Shank sort of opened it up to the kids this morning and said, "Hey, you know, what's going on in the school? What kind of vibes are you getting in your life?" It was interesting, a couple of them were talking about how angry some kids are in schools. I can almost guarantee you that those children have almost everything given to them that they want. And they probably have very little responsibility. There's a lot of things about the Amish beliefs that I have issues with, but there's one thing they understand it. One of the things that they'll do, particularly if a dad has a bunch of boys, and I don't, for a long time I didn't know how they would do it, but I think I understand. Like, as the boys start getting older, the dad will just go buy them a farm. And I think, how do they afford to do that? And maybe some of them have the money, but I think some of them just realize it's kind of like the creation mandate. Here, take this, subdue it, make it work. And that's their commission. And it's surprising. They usually do it. You know, the dad doesn't just hand it to them. They have to pay for it. They have to pay the taxes. They have to make it work. But it's amazing what some of these 20 and 21-year-old guys, what they do. Number 8. Now, you can get in trouble talking about child raising tips. But this one comes from, one of the things with having a family is you hear what other mothers say to the mother of your children. And one of the things that one of the mothers here told Becky is, she says, to keep life sane, in other words, less chaotic, limit options. Don't put out six kinds of cereal and say, okay, which one do you want this morning? Nope, here's your cereal. And you'll like it, right? One more of these uninspired ones. The last time, once or twice a year, there's a doctor in Columbus that has specialized in working with children with autism and some of their health issues. And this last time, Becky took Aaron up to have him looked at. Apparently the doctor didn't have anybody else scheduled after Aaron was there. And Becky said, he just talked and talked and talked. And one of the things he said, we Americans, we simply eat too much. He said they are discovering some real benefits to fasting. And he said even if you only do it, let's say if you eat at 6 in the morning, just try not eating after 6 in the evening. Just give your body a break. Now, it's not a point to be legalistic about, but I have noticed that. I've tried that, and it's like, man, I can rest. The body is not at work with doing that particular activity. Now, I'm sure if I were to go around the congregation, there would probably have, each of you could probably come up with a handful at least of ideas that you found. But Jesus offers rest. He offers abundant life. So how should we then live? The last point is what's in front of us. Rest in the completed work of Christ, remembering the broken body and His shed blood. There's some interesting language in Exodus chapter 24. This was after when they first went to Mount Sinai and the first revealing of God when the mountain shook. But Moses hadn't gone up yet. But anyway, God invites Moses and 70 of the elders to go up to the mountain. And listen to what it says. Or apparently Moses had offered a sacrifice. And Moses then took the blood, sprinkled it on the people, and said, "This is the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words." Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel went up and saw the God of Israel. Under His feet was something like a pavement made of sapphire, as bright blue as the sky. But God did not raise His hand against these leaders of the Israelites. They saw God, and they ate and drank. But what happened next was that Moses goes to the mountain, and there he receives for 40 days and 40 nights, God is giving him the law. Let me read from Matthew. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when He had given thanks, He broke it and gave it to His disciples, saying, "Take and eat, this is my body." Then He took a cup, and when He had given thanks, He gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is the blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." One day later, He said, "It is finished." You see the contrast? This is the blood of the covenant in the Old Testament. 40 days and 40 nights of instruction, laws, rules, regulations. Jesus says, "This is my body, this is my blood of the new covenant." One day later, it's done. That probably doesn't mean as much to us as it would to an Old Testament Israelite. But essentially what He's saying, not another drop of blood has to be shed for the sins of humanity. It's done. Can you find rest for your souls in that? This symbol, this reality that we are about to partake of, it's done. There is no more blood needs to be offered. For 1,500 years, the blood never stopped flowing. Well, I mean, it probably did in certain times, but it was constant. It's done. So I would invite you all, to those of you who have claimed that rest that God has promised, to join us in taking part of the fellowship.